All right. So, welcome to Entropy Sorted 3, Episode 3. This one is intended to be super short. Like 15, 16 minutes, maybe 20 minutes tops. I think I said that in the last one. I'm not sure if I said that in the last one, but it didn't work out last time. But it's going to work out this time, I hope. So I'm going to start with my one fan. I wanted to say thank you for the well wishes, and I hope you know that that's a good sign, right? That you want the best for others, right? Like somebody that you've never even met, and you want the best for them. And this goes for anybody else watching, right? Like it is a good sign when you can sincerely want the best for somebody else, without any incentive for betterment or gain to yourself. If you feel that way, you should take heart, right? Like you should at least rest in the fact that knowing that you've got love in your heart rather than like bitterness or anger or malice or any of that stuff. So if that helps your self esteem a little bit, then great, because it is a commendable quality. So for this little mini dissertation, I want to talk about ego, self esteem, motivation, and intention, motivation and intention. And then also I've got a couple little miscellaneous reflections to cover as well. But now, before I actually get started in the bulk of this, I just want to say, like, man, again, I don't know, how many of you out there believe in God, but, and some of you don't believe in God, but you believe in, the concept of, the concept of synchronicity. And if you don't know, you can look it up. Synchronicity is a term coined by Carl Jung, and it's almost self-explanatory. It's just when life synchronizes around you, right? Like, or when you seem to have like prophetic thoughts or something like that. Carl Jung calls it synchronicity. Some people, think it's God. I choose to believe that it's God. But anyway, so as I was preparing to record this little blurb about ego, self-esteem, motivation, and intentions, I'm listening to YouTube, and Jocko Podcast 80 comes up, and 80 is all about motivation, intention, and well, he's kind of centered around thinking you're slick, right? Like, so I think that his episode is really focused on, towards those people who have ulterior motives all the time, or like, self-centered or rotten motives. I think he's trying to provide a wake-up call. I'm actually approaching this subject from the other side of the spectrum. But it's just funny that, like, literally as I'm preparing to record this, that episode happens to come on. Carl Jung would call that synchronicity. Anyways, so in order to make sure that I can communicate these ideas clearly, we need to abandon preconceived notions. We need to abandon, what's the word I'm looking for here? Connotations, right? So certain words have connotations, and connotations it's just context, right? It's context for words. So you say a certain word, the connotation is negative, right? So the context of that word being used is with a negative disposition, from a negative disposition. So we need to abandon those. They're useful. I'm not saying abandon them all the time, but just for this discussion, namely because ego, the term ego has a very negative connotation. Because it is often the source of negativity or ill-advised action. But in reality, ego isn't inherently negative. You hear people say things like, "Oh, that person's got a big ego," or like, "Oh, that person, that person needs to shed their ego," or like, "Oh man, that person, completely like that person has completely set his ego aside," right? Like all of these things, right? Well, the fact is that it is impossible to shed your ego. It is impossible to set your ego aside. We all have egos, and we all have them all the time. So, to help you understand the way that I conceptualize ego, let's think about an analogy, right? And this one's maybe a little bit on the nose because ego is, your self-image. Ego is how you view yourself. So let's use the on the nose analogy of looking into a mirror. So when you look into a mirror and you're dressed up like a cowboy, right? You appear like a cowboy, right? So the ego that people are talking about you need to shed is that exterior layer of clothing, basically the costumes that we dress ourselves up in. The way that you appear in the mirror because of the clothes that you're wearing, right? And so when people say you need to shed your ego, what they're really saying is, you need to shed the costume. And so, like, if you were to look into a mirror completely naked, that's not looking into a mirror without, ego, with, having shed your ego. What that is that's looking into a mirror and seeing yourself, your ego for what it truly is, the most raw and like just genuine version of yourself that there is. And people don't like that. That's why like they say, if you have a dream where you're like naked on stage, right? Like that comes down like that's a reflection of insecurity, right? The reason is because your most bare and fundamental self, right, or sense of self or understanding of yourself, you're insecure about it, and so I don't want to carry the analogy too far because I'm not suggesting like you need to be able to go out into the world completely butt naked, but for the sake of the analogy. That is exactly what you need, right? Like to shed your ego, quote unquote, in the way that people use that term and the way that people mean it, is essentially to strip your ego completely bare naked and then show that to people. And if you are secure, if you have self-esteem, you can do that, and you might be aware that other people are looking at your naked ego, at your bare ego, and judging it or disproving it from their finely dressed or padded, or flourished egos, right? Self-esteem is being able to present your bare ego, be aware of other people who may laugh or snicker or disprove or judge, and still feel comfortable wearing only that bare ego. That's what pure true self-esteem is. And how do you get self-esteem? Well, it comes down to your values. If you, in my opinion, anyways, if you have for better or for worse, really, it's anything actually. So like, say your value is like, I want to have more money than everybody else, and like in your heart, in your truest, deepest part of your heart, like that is the most important thing, is to say, I've made more money, right? Like that's the purpose of life. That's what that's what life is all about. And you've been making more money, then you can completely strip your ego and still feel comfortable. You can have like true self-esteem because you are living right by your deepest core values. Now, I don't recommend that, right? Because that's kind of faulty and hollow. You're placing your life in a very empty pursuit, in my opinion, anyways. So, but a better example, right, is like, I want to live, my life, full of love, right? I want to live my life in a way that, my existence in this world, I am a channel of love from the ethereal, right? The ethereal meaning, the non-existent. So it's like, yeah, a really negative or rotten person is a vessel, and so out of the ethereal, through them and into the world, comes negativity and rottenness and selfishness, right? So let's say your core value is that you just want to be a channel of love into the world, right? And that's your most important, standard for self esteem, and that is what you truly, 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 believe that you carry with you all the time, right? But you're miserable and you're sad. The reason is because you are accomplishing what you set out to, right? You might feel like you are bringing love and positivity, and you're bringing genuine and sincere goodness into the world. But because the rest of the world doesn't value that, or the rest of the world is all dressed up in their little egos, and they don't see that you shining is exactly what you think people should do, and so they judge you, and so you haven't recognized that. Hey, so what if they judge, right? Like, I'm still doing what I believe I should be doing. But once you recognize where your heart lies, and once you recognize whether you are living by that value or not, you can bring those two facts together into alignment, and you can establish solid self-esteem. You can establish the type of self-esteem that will let you go out into the world, presenting your stripped and bare ego, and you can rest assured in yourself. Now, what I'm talking about doesn't mean you won't experience sadness, right? Like, there's still issues of loneliness, and there's still issues of purpose and things like that. And when you get into that kind of stuff, then it seems like it takes a higher power, which I think it does, because self-esteem or no, there is peace in life that only support from above seems to provide. So, but yeah, so like right now, if you seem to struggle with self-esteem, or if you seem to struggle with ego, you know, do an honest self reflection. Figure out where your heart lies, right? Figure out if you're living by that. If you're not, then bring yourself into alignment with that, and then cherish yourself for living aligned with your deepest values. If you are already living that way, then skip straight to cherishing yourself for living that way. Understand that that is your ego, and that everyone has one, and it's impossible to be egoless, right? Everyone has a self image, but the trick is to recognize the bare self image, the true raw self image, and then love that. So next is motivation and intention. Just the same way that ego and self-esteem are connected, right? Like, ego is sort of the basis, right? Like, ego is the starting point, and self-esteem is liking your true bare ego without completely stripped. I believe that motivation and intention have the same relationship. So that is to say, if your motivation, and again, I was just listening to the Jocko podcast episode 80, I think it was. All of this that I'm saying, I wanted to say independently. It just happened to come on. And he gave a good example. He gave some good examples. And so I'm going to actually reference his podcast. I hope that's okay. I don't know. But so, he talks about like if you're walking into a meeting and your intent is to look good in front of the boss and get promoted, right? People are going to smell that. That is absolutely true. So let's break that down, though. Motivation. I think that even though I think that motivation and intention are different, right? So you might have the motivation to, let's pick something negative. Like, let's say you have the motivation to, get back at this person over here. And so then, you go to this party with the intention of, picking up the girl he's interested in, right? And so like your motivation was to dig at this guy, right? But the intention of your action was to seduce this girl, right? So like that's motivation versus intention. However, they kind of refer to the same thing, because you could also say like, well, when you're trying to seduce that girl to get back at him, your true intention isn't even to seduce that girl. Your true intention is to get back at that girl. So I actually like to also compare this to strategy versus tactics, right? Motivation is strategy. That is the long-term game. Intention is tactics. That is like the individual maneuvers so motivation, strategy being getting from point A to point B. Intentions, tactics are the maneuvers that you make while trying to get from point A to point B. So that's how I break it down in my mind, and differentiate it. So yeah, it's totally true. If your motivation or intention is to look good in front of the boss and get promoted, then people are going to detect that, because people aren't dumb, right? They have the same fundamental cognitive capacity that you do. They can smell what you're trying to do there. However, you've got to be careful, right? You cannot base your self-image on the way that people perceive you because of a little thing that that a well-established phenomenon called projection, right? And so in Jocko's analogy, right, walking into a meeting where, let's say you walk into a meeting and you're honest, sincere, and dear. And actually, I like this analogy because it's something that I feel like I relate to very deeply. If you listened to the last episode, you heard about the struggles that I have at work. And so sincerely and dearly, I have the team and the team's success and well-being at my deepest, at the deepest part of my heart, work-related wise, right? My sincere and true motivation for the things that I say and do are team-oriented, right? But if the people around you are insecure, right? Or if the people around you have, intentions of looking good for the boss. Let's say you're in a room of, 12 people, you're the 13th, and all 12 of those people, their motivation lies in looking good in front of the boss. Then when you show up with genuine and sincere motivation to help the team, right, what's going to happen is you are going to look good in front of the boss, right? Because you are going to do things, and say things that actually are geared towards the true, genuine, sincere best interests of the team. Well, the other people around you whose motivation lies in looking good and getting promoted, they're going to project their motivations onto you. And so when you are trying to contribute to the meeting in a sincere and genuine way to better the team, they're all going to see you as being, as trying to just look good and get promoted, right? And they're all going to resent you for that. That is not a you problem. If you struggle with this, that is not a you problem, okay? That is a them problem, right? And if you genuinely and sincerely in your heart know that you just want to help, then keep doing what you're doing, right? And ignore the haters, right? Just ignore all the bitter, nasty people out there, because that seems to be what the world is full of. And I mean, here's an example. I genuinely, at my new current place, I genuinely and sincerely just want to help, right? And I just want to see the team be as successful as we can possibly be. But I notice when I speak up in a meeting, it seems to me like the reaction that people have around me is very much like Jocko was talking about, when someone is just trying to look good and get promoted. That is the way it seems like the people, around me tend to react and perceive me. And I recognize that. But because my motivation sincerely, genuinely, 100% truly is just the betterment of the team, I pulled the engineer who had been, the 35-year engineer who I'm working under to support. Basically, by the way, my role is there's an engineer there who's been there for 35 years, and he is the designer, and my role is basically just to do whatever he tells me. So while he's doing designs, and that's okay with me, but while he's doing designs, I'm working to support old products. I'm working to test things. I'm working to do this. I'm working, and so I basically have to just follow the direction that he's going. I pulled him aside privately, just me and him. And I told him, like, hey, look, like, genuinely, my only intention, my only motivation is to better the team, right? And so when I speak up in these meetings, my intention genuinely is to provide a valuable and meaningful contribution to the meeting. But it seems like, people, it seems like I'm not being well received, right? Because it seems like people perceive me as speaking up just to look good. And I was like, and honestly, like, that's not what I want, right? Like, and honestly, I don't even care if my contributions appear to come from me. Well, that's not how I phrased it, but like, essentially what I had asked him was like, so what if, like, can we work something out where it's like, if I have a question or if I have a suggestion that, like, I can just write it down and give it to you to pass on, to, like, because I understand that maybe I don't know all the ins and the outs, and maybe I'm speaking up about something that is irrelevant or whatever, and I know that you probably have a better judgment of when things should and should not be said. So what if we did it this way? What if, like, before the meeting, I shared all of my thoughts and ideas and suggestions and questions with you, and then I'll just, be quiet, and I'll let you, ask these thoughts and ideas and suggestions, so that it doesn't seem like this young guy is just trying to jump in and, get credit for being, thoughtful or have good ideas, right? It did not go over well. It was like, he was like, he kind of just sidestepped it. He was like, yeah, maybe we'll see. Okay, we'll see. And really, since then, it seems like I'm actually excluded from meetings more than anything. And so when I thought what I was doing, like offering just to provide all of my feedback to him and let it all flow through him, being my superior, I thought that would ingratiate me to him, and that I would be included in meetings, and that, I'd get my questions answered, and I wouldn't have to speak up, and I wouldn't have to, like, step on any toes or do anything like that. But what it really did was it just led to me being excluded from meetings altogether, which is sad and it's disappointing. But yes, in my opinion, that's an example of, having truly solid motivation, for the, intent that I bring to a meeting or whatever. But anyways, so I hope that this ties back into ego and self-esteem, right? So when you identify what's at the deepest core, like level of your heart, basically your most bare and exposed ego, when you when you identify that, you need to, in order to create some self-esteem, you need to make sure that your motivation is coming from that place, and your motivation is not coming from the place of, I need a new fancy wristwatch, I need a new fancy, jacket, I need some new shiny shoes, I need to really dress myself up to look good in front of these people. If you do that, then your motivation is not in line with your most bare ego. And your self-esteem will not be real. It'll be flimsy. And anytime somebody laughs at you, or anytime somebody disagrees with you or mocks you or whatever, you're going to fall apart. But if you can make sure that your motivation is in line with your ego and like the most core values of your heart, well, then you can build a solid self-esteem. And when you have a solid self-esteem, it doesn't matter if people project their insecurities or their motivations onto you. You can just keep doing what you're doing. So there's that. Now, in the beginning of the episode, I promised, a few reflections and then some miscellaneous stuff. The miscellaneous stuff is I'm about to cook creamy lemon garlic chicken. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, I don't know if I've said this before, but I'm going to say it now, and I'll say it again many times. My whole life, I'm 32, my whole life I've been so bad at cooking that I could burn cereal. I've just been really bad. But lately I've been like really putting a lot of my focus and attention and efforts towards, learning to cook and cook well. And so the latest dish that I'm about to try, even though it's kind of late, is creamy garlic chicken. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. I'm hopeful. Also, in the last episode, I was like, oh, well, this thing happened and it kind of hurt my feelings, and I'll tell you about it in a second. And then I never did. So I'll tell you about it now. What happened was I walked out. So like I was telling you, the guy that I'm working under, he'd been with the company for 35 years. He's a designer, right? So he's like a senior engineer. Well, a dude who's maybe 2 years older than I am, so I'm 32, he's probably like 34. I got hired about 9 months ago, by the way. Well, we just hired a guy who's 2 years older than I am into a designer role. Like, so he's like the senior engineer. And good on him. I don't resent him for that at all. Like that's like, I'm happy for him. But I do, and I've brought this up to, the senior engineer over me and my true boss, the person I report to, who's the director of engineering. I brought this up to both of them that it seems as if he is regarded, a little bit more seriously than I am, right? Like, when he makes suggestions or when he has concerns or feedback, it's taken a little bit more seriously than whenever I speak up. And again, I celebrate the fact that he is taken seriously, right? I cannot like that. It seems like I'm being dismissed, or it seems like, my contributions are being diminished. I can dislike that without, resenting him for not having experienced that, right? Like, I'm genuinely happy for him. But I went into my senior engineer's office, and he had given me a task that morning, and I was like, hey, so-and-so, I finished this task. I just sent it to you. I just wanted to go ahead and lay it to rest, right? So I wanted to see if we can just pull it up, and then you tell me, is this exactly what you're looking for? If it is, then we can close the book on this task and I'll move on. If not, you can give me the feedback right here, right now, and then I'll go make these corrections. Like, do you have the time? And he's like, yeah, sure, I guess I've got the time, whatever. And so then he like slowly goes to his emails and he's like dragging his ass, and he's, finally he opens the document, and as he opens the document, and I'm like, okay, so, here it is. And, like I start to discuss it. And while I do that, this young senior engineer guy, the one who just recently got hired, he's on his lunch break. He happens to walk by the office with like a little bowl of food, and then he just kind of like pops his head in, and then the dude that had been there for 35 years is like, hey, real chummy buddy, and I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. And so then he comes into the office, and the dude's like, "Do you have a good New Year?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I had a great New Year. How about yourself?" Blah 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 blah. And then they just like have this like long chummy like conversation about like non-work related stuff, right? And I'm just standing there, right? And I'm there under work related pretenses, right? And I'm just trying to put a task to rest so I can move on. And so I'm just standing there, and after about 5 minutes, like not an exaggeration, like I'm literally, it's like 5 minutes of them just talking, not just niceties either. They're actually having like an in-depth conversation about smokers, for of all things. And so like one is like, what temperature do you smoke your meats at? And the other one's like, oh, well, I like to do it this way, blah, blah, blah. And so after about 5 minutes, I finally just was like, you know what? Like, I'll come back, right? Like, I don't need to just stand here awkwardly in this office while these guys have this conversation, so that I can wait and and check this task off the list. So I quietly, I mean, and not in a bitter way, but like I quietly excused myself to go and check on another project that I was working on. And I heard, like, after I walked out of the office, I heard the dude that I'm supposed to be supporting. He was like, "Oh, he must have left because we were making him hungry," right? Because they were talking about like smoking meats and how they do it, and the temperatures that they pervert. But yeah, I mean, it actually really hurt my feelings, because when I walked into the office that morning, right, I oh, he wasn't actually there when I got there. I was there before him. But when he got there, I like popped my head into his office and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's like, "Hey," he's real cool, and he was really like reserved. And I was like, just seeing how you were, how your New Year was. And he's like, "Yeah, it was good, whatever." I'm like, "Well, also, just trying to see like what's on the books for the day, like what are our priorities, what are our tasks, projects, whatever." And he's like, "I don't know, like I've got to sit down and work through it." And he was just very uninterested. And then, which, okay, you know what? He doesn't like me as a person. He likes the other guy as a person. I can accept that without my feelings getting hurt. But then on a professional level, I go in there not under the pretense of, "Hey, how's it going? How's your New Year?" Right? I go into there like, "Hey, you gave me this task that you want done. Here it is, right? Can I check it off the list?" And, then he like voluntarily, I mean, the other guy didn't initiate the conversation. The senior engineer that I was talking to initiated the conversation. He was the one that was like, "How's your New Year?" Like, and started the conversation. So it felt really disrespectful for him to just like, turn and engage this person who is basically my age. He's basically my peer. Although he's my senior engineer, he's my peer. So to completely undermine, the conversation that he agreed to have with me so that I could check that task off the list. Even though we're there being paid to do work, he just kind of ignored me to like turn and have this conversation with this other guy that was completely unrelated to work. And I'm just standing there awkwardly. So I didn't like that. It did not feel good. I'll be honest about that. But anyways, I'm at 34 minutes, so it's not a whole hour long. And this is an improvement. And I will check in again later. Hey, by the way, to the one guy, if this is something you'd be interested in, I'd love to have a conversation. Maybe one day we can have a talk. I actually have a very, very, very vague and loose idea for what I'm gonna do with this whole podcast thing. Right now, it's almost more of a video diary, but eventually, I want it to be a little bit more structured. Eventually, I want it to be a little bit more informative, right? Eventually, I want it to be something that people will, really enjoy and benefit and learn from. But at the moment, I'm just kind of free form doing whatever, right? While I practice, the way that Jordan Peterson says, I'm being the fool. But yeah, if you ever wanted to talk, I'd be open to it, right? I mean, I'm not saying that I have any better insight or ability to work through life's problems than anybody else, especially not you. But I have a different perspective. So maybe if you're struggling with some things in life, an alternative perspective might help. Maybe you can shed some light on situations that I'm going through. Who knows? To the one guy who seems to be listening, let me know if you're interested. I'd love to have a chat, and we can put it on YouTube. Anyways, all right, everybody, take care. I'm gonna go cook some chicken at 11:45 at night. Man, what is wrong with me? All right, good night.